and welcome everyone to the course Becoming a Hacker. My name is Ellen Evans and I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I'll be your facilitator for today's course. Today we welcome our instructor, Omar Santos. Omar Santos is an active member of the cybersecurity community, leading several industry-wide initiatives and standards. He is a principal engineer in the Cisco Product Security Incident Response Team within Cisco's Security Research and Operations. He mentors and leads engineers and incident managers during the investigation and resolution of security vulnerabilities in all Cisco products and cloud services. You can read more on Omar's bio and bio widget in the widget tray. I'll turn the program over to your instructor in just a moment, but first I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items to help you get the most out of today's course. And now, without further delay, I'd like to turn the program over to your instructor. Please welcome Omar Santos.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you everybody for joining today. I really appreciate you giving me a few minutes of your time, not only today, but tomorrow. We do have a lot of material to cover, but before we get started, I want to share this quick disclaimer while I'm actually sharing my screen, because most of the presentation today will be done by demonstrations and a lab guide. But the disclaimer is that the information that we're providing here is for educational purposes only. Either O'Reilly or myself or no other entity represented here is responsible for the misuse of this information. This information, of course, can be used for good and also can be used for bad things, right? I'm going to show you how attackers can compromise a system and then, of course, manipulate those systems to perform different actions, right? And then the main purpose of it is for you to, one, understand the capabilities of the attackers, and second, better protect your organization. So hopefully you're able to actually see my screen, or at least the continuation of the slides. We're going to start today with an overview of ethical hacking and pen testing methodologies, and what is ethical hacking, what is red teaming, what is bug bounties, pen testing, what are the differences between them, what is the methodology, which is the most important. And then we're going to go over a few tips on how you can build your own lab with Websploit labs. Websploit is actually something that I'm recommending for you to use. You don't have to completely use it, but I'm definitely recommending for you to use to enhance your learning, because it has tons and tons and tons of exercises that some of them you're going to cover here today, but it can give you, I'm not exaggerating, months of training, or practice, if you will. And we'll go into that in a second. Throughout the course, we're actually going to go over how AI is impacting ethical hacking, and also the methodologies and the tools and the way that you actually interact with systems nowadays, and also how attackers are using AI as well to perform some malfeasance and actions, right? Then we're going to go over passive and active reconnaissance. In passive reconnaissance, you're basically using techniques of gathering information from public sources, as we call open source intelligence, and in active reconnaissance, as whenever you're doing things like scanning or fuzzing, or a type of enumerations, and now you're interacting with the target systems. Then we're going to conclude today with an introduction to hacking modern web applications, and how to hack user credentials and cracking passwords. Then tomorrow we're going to shift gears into an introduction to networking devices, the fundamentals of wireless networking, and then we're going to deep dive into the details of buffer overflows, the challenges of memory safe or unsafe languages, and then creating payloads for taking advantage of those type of vulnerabilities for creating nifty exploits for code execution. And then we're going to go over social engineering, and also a lot of post-exploitation techniques, including evasion techniques, lateral movement, command and control, exfiltration, previous escalation. And then we're going to conclude tomorrow on a few best practices and examples of penetration testing reports and other reports as well, like bounties and so on. So as you see, we have a lot of material to cover. Now, this is actually part of a learning path. I am not going to spend a lot of time in here, but we have a very comprehensive series of cybersecurity and AI security courses in here, both live, just like this one, that are free with your subscription, and also on demand. And I'm going to send a few links throughout the course through the group chat for you as reference to a few materials that we have here for enhancing your learning. We also have a GitHub repository that, as a matter of fact, let me bring it up in the screen here. This GitHub repository, I always make the joke that if you don't get anything out of this class, I can guarantee you that you will get something out of this GitHub repository. I started this GitHub repository for my own benefit, for putting sample code, my own scripts, tutorials, many different references to other resources and so on. And I started putting them in my books, in my video courses, and these live trainings, in other conferences that I present, like DEF CON. I lead the Red Team Village at DEF CON, and it grew significantly. As you're seeing here, 16,500 over that have started the repository. There are many people that actually are using it, that are contributing it. So if you don't get anything out of this class, I always make this joke that I can guarantee you that you will absolutely get something out of this GitHub repository. So we will definitely revisit it throughout the course in here. Now, we have a lot of labs here for you to complete. Some of them are incorporated within your lab guide, and I'm going to share with you the lab guide in a second. But if you click on the link that is in these slides, hackingscenarios.com, it will basically take you to this website where it lists several labs that you do not need to install anything in your PC. These labs I created with Pearson here in O'Reilly, and it will just take you to O'Reilly. And they are step-by-step. Some of them are 20 minutes long, some of them are 30 minutes long, and so on. And you can click on Start, and it will actually start an environment, just like you're seeing here. You have a terminal window, and it actually walks you through all the different scenarios. And even whenever you start going over the details and some of the commands, if you click on it, and of course, it will run the commands for you and so on. So definitely take advantage of those. They're completely free, with your subscription. And we have a lot of additional labs here in O'Reilly that cover cybersecurity, that cover machine learning, AI, how principles of Python and many different programming languages and so on. So definitely take advantage of those at your own pace. Now, going back to the slides in here, the other thing that I want to go before we go over an overview of ethical hacking is your lab guide. So in the resource icon in the bottom of your screen, you should see a pop-up. So once you click on it, you're going to get a pop-up window that will have the slides, just like Ellen mentioned, and also it's going to have your lab guide. The core of the training is the lab guide. Now, I am seeing here a question that is actually perfect time in PK. And PK asks, is it mandatory to perform those labs today? Or is it better to listen first to your sessions and then after that focus on the labs later? Most of it is going to be, as a matter of fact, most of my talks in here are going to be while you do some of the labs, but I'm going to be giving you a few breaks throughout the presentation here today. I am not going to give you separate breaks for like bio breaks and so on, or for you to stretch. But I'm going to combine those. You're going to have several of them where you're going to be completing different exercises. However, I know that everybody is extremely busy nowadays, right? More than ever, especially how things are moving so fast nowadays. And you may have to step away. Some of you may be at work. Some of you may be, traveling, this all over the place. We have a very big audience here today. So is it mandatory? No. Is it something that perhaps, you can take advantage, while we actually are talking and introducing some of the concepts? Absolutely. Can you do it after the class as a homework or follow-up? Yes. And another question that I get all the time, can I keep this lab guide forever, and is Websploit, which I'm going to be introducing in a second, something that I can keep for forever, and I don't have to worry about timing out and so on? And the answer is yes. Websploit and this lab guide will be available. Again, you can download it; it's yours. And Websploit is completely open source and available for anybody to actually to use. So what is Websploit? Let me actually go over that real quick. In your lab guide, you have the first thing is what is Websploit Labs, right? So Websploit Labs is a learning environment that I created for tons of these trainings, for trainings that I do in O'Reilly, DEF CON, and many other places. I also teach inside of my company, using Websploit to universities, and universities are now using it as well to teach courses. So what it is nothing super creative. If you click on Websploit Labs in here, or if you go to websploit.org, it will take you to this website. Let me make it a little bit better in the screen here for you to see. Same introduction that I just gave you. It has over 500 exercises. It is way more than 8 hours. I'm talking about hours and hours and hours that I'm putting here of training. And again, we're just scratching the surface here today, even though your lab guide has over 100 pages today. And yes, it has over 100 pages. So yes, you will not be able to actually finish all of them today, and so on. Now, as I asked, is there a recording to this session? All the sessions in O'Reilly are recorded, and you will get access to it with the same link that you joined today. And Ellen actually was kind enough to to mention that in the introduction, and you also have some of those instructions in the group chat, but you will get that email later with a recording. All right, so how do you set up Websploit Labs? The first step is that I ask you to put in a VM, and that can be in Windows. Now, Mac, because the new models of Mac are using ARM, there are a few things that may not work well in here. Now, those are the containers. You may, of course, install Kali perfectly and so on, but the containers that I'm going to cover in a few minutes, those are created in x86, and I have a few note in here about that. So most people that are actually using a Mac, they either put Proxmox in a different environment. That's what I do at home, or get an old PC, put VirtualBox, VMworks Workstation, ESXi. You pick your blessing or your poison, right? Depending on how you want to see it. However, you can also deploy this in the cloud very easily, right? You can put Kali or Parrot, and those are the most popular Linux distributions. And once you put those in a VM, then you run this command that I'm highlighting in the screen. And what that is going to do is going to have an install script, and that will install a few additional applications that are not by default, or not installed by default in Kali or Parrot. And then I also installed Docker and Docker Compose, and that's kind of the heart of it, because it has many, many different intentional vulnerable applications running in containers. Now, another question that I get all the time is it safe to actually put into my machine? Does it have malware? And it's like, no, we're not playing with malware here. It's just intentional vulnerable applications that you do not expose even to the rest of the system. Everything is running in a Docker bridge environment. So you have a Docker bridge for all these containers, and there's another one here down below. And I'm going to go into the details now. So the ones on the left that you see here, as far as the level of difficulty, they are beginner to intermediate, right? And a lot of these, if not all, are very popular intentional vulnerable application that has been used in the industry for people that are getting started and looking into understanding these type of techniques and attacks, and of course ethical hacking. Now, the ones on the right, the ones that are labeled as intermediate to advanced, those I personally created them, and those are more of a capture the flag type of environment. And if you're not familiar with what capture the flag is, it is a series of mini competitions, if you will. They gamified, we gamify the experience for the learners in many conferences and educational institutions like universities and so on. They're very popular nowadays. And then you practice with different scenarios. So at DEF CON, at the Red Team Village, every year I release one of these. Last year I actually did 3, which are the ones that are in the bottom here. So that's why in the lab guide, you're going to see first starting with some of the ones on the left, and then moving to a few examples, especially tomorrow, that we use the intermediate to advanced scenarios, and some of them, but a few of the examples are using the containers on the right or the ones in the bottom. Now, as I mentioned to you, this can be used as homework. So you may say, oh my God, I only have an M1, M2, M3 Mac, and now I have to actually worry about putting a VM or containers or put this in the cloud and so on. Yes, you can absolutely do this after the class. You have access to the lab guide forever, and be creative. Also change the environment a little bit, right? So once you actually finish, and again, we're gonna be covering a lot of the labs here today, but there are a lot more. There's 500 plus exercises in Websploit. Now, the first break that I'm going to give you in the next few minutes, after we cover some of the introductory topics, you will be actually having time to set up Websploit. So now, Websploit was also part of the instructions whenever you register as far as the course setup. So a lot of you may already have Websploit running. So if you do that, of course, I'm going to give you some time later to start with the exercise 1. So we'll get to that in a second. All right, so let me go back to the slides in here, and let's go over a brief overview of what is this thing called ethical hacking, right? And what are the different permutations of this? I have a few boring definitions in here. Hopefully you already know these, but just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, an ethical hacker is somebody like you and me that is hired or allowed or permitted, that's a big keyword there, by some organization or the owner of a system that they're willing for you to mimic what an attacker will do to those systems or networks, and then demonstrate how these tactics and techniques that attackers use can be used to find vulnerabilities. Right? In many cases, you have the scope, so the things that you can do or not do within an environment. In many cases, they are very broad. So your engagement may be several weeks or even months long, and in some cases are very narrow. It can be a week or 2 weeks, type of engagement. Now, that is in the traditional pen test and so on. Later, I'm going to cover the differences between red team, pen test, and bug bounties, which are very popular now. Now, a few other definitions to also make sure that everybody understands these concepts. I am going to talk about, and already mentioned it, vulnerabilities. But what are those things? Those are exploitable weakness, and again, exploitable weakness in a system or designs. You can find them in protocols, in operating systems, in applications, in hardware, in system designs, in your laptop, all the way to a cloud a service, to a network device, to AI. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is immune to vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities will also come and go, right? They're kind of a commodity nowadays, right? So whenever you are learning about ethical hacking, and whenever you are engaged in an ethical hacking scenario, remember that keyword that I said, exploitable weakness. An automated scan that will tell you, yes, you may be susceptible to CVE 12345, so an identifier of a vulnerability. That is not ethical hacking. or pen testing or red teaming. That is just an automatic scan that can be done for vulnerability management. But if you are hired to do a pen test or a red team or even a bug bounty, is for you to demonstrate how can it be exploitable, that you actually truly exploit the vulnerability, that you collect evidence that you're exploiting it, and depending on the permissions that you have, in other words, the scope, that you move to post-exploitation activities. So that's very, very important for people that are getting started, because I see in many cases that folks start, I'm starting in ethical hacking, and the only thing that they do is they buy a couple of scanners or they use open source tools, and then they create reports, and that's definitely not ethical hacking. Whenever we go over the details of red teaming, you will see that in some scenarios, even finding vulnerabilities is not the primary um, objective of some of the engagements. But we'll get to that in a second. Now, a few other things is, what are threats? Threats is any potential danger to an asset. Vulnerabilities are indeed threats, but not every threat is a vulnerability. Basically, a threat can be somebody stealing your laptop. It can be fire, national disaster, and so on. Geopolitical event. But a vulnerability is actually something that, again, is a weakness that is exploitable in a system, uh, protocols, design, and so on. Now, an exploit, it is basically a recipe. People think that exploits are always big, nice, very sophisticated programs written in Python or in C or Rust or any programming language there. But at the end of the day, it can be a text file that says, click here, type this, send this other button or send this payload, and then boom, you compromise a system. So to give you an example of those exploits, let me go back to my browser here. And if you go to a website called exploit-db, and I think that I also have that later in your slides, definitely is in your lab guide, you see a lot of these, entries, and several of them are actually from just a few days ago, 3 days ago, from April 15th. So you see a few things like Jenkins for local file execution and open clinic information disclosure. I'm just going to open a few random ones in here, right? Nothing that is planned. But the first one, it is a Python script. So you actually see, a very, detailed Python script to take advantage of a given vulnerability. In this case, it is identified by CVE 2024-23897. Then let's look at the next one. That one is a text file. Perfect. Actually, this is the two examples that I was looking for. So I didn't need to open that many. So as you saw, what I mentioned to you just a second ago, that an exploit is not always a fancy Python script or a fancy JavaScript script or a fancy payload, or call it, in many cases you have payloads, but a very, very fancy, elaborate, sophisticated program written in Rust. In this case, is basically just a series of instructions. It says steps to reproduce, access the vulnerable component, navigate to this page, change the appointment UID parameter value to test different IDs, for example, and they give you that, and then you exploit the vulnerability, right? So, and as a matter of fact, this is an interesting one. As you're seeing here, I mean, this is just random. I mean, you saw me just picking it, from the list, and it shows you the impact of some of these vulnerabilities. Look at the last sentence. As a result, an attacker could deduce the number of appointments performed by a private clinic, surgeries, and private doctors, right? It's only the number of appointments, probably not getting that, but probably somebody found, and potentially a breach. It was using a breach for this entity or program called Open Clinic. I am definitely not familiar with them. Probably you are. I'm not in the medical field, but I can tell you there's a lot of them, like old scripts. I mean, many of them out there that are susceptible to. Again, everything is susceptible to any vulnerability, right? whether you're web application and web application vulnerabilities or buffer overflows in a core router of the internet, it doesn't matter. But a lot of these are susceptible to regulations, right? So it is indeed something that is very popular in the business of ethical hacking, because you're required to actually do, in many scenarios, pen tests and ethical hacking activities and so on, and demonstrate that you're actually doing vulnerability management, of course, within your organization. All right. So the other question that I get all the time, and I'm surprised I didn't get it in the Q&A panel. And again, if you have a question for me, please do so in the Q&A panel. That allows me to track whether I have answered your question or not. But the question is, how do I get started? Tell me, how can tomorrow I can get a job on this thing, on cybersecurity and specifically ethical hacking? And a lot of people ask me, should I get a certification? Should I go back to college? Should I go? Even people that are in college tell me, hey, should I then continue to my PhD or get a certification and so on? And to bring things into perspective, of course, I have this AI-generated thing called The Art of Hacking, and Omar Santos is the doctor of nothing. And the reason that I joke in this is because it completely depends on your, not mine, not your neighbors, not your colleague in here taking the course, but your career path and what you want to do. And where do you stand right now? So to complicate things more, I'm probably going to get your money back because I'm not giving you an answer yet, is that I am sharing this screenshot. And as a matter of fact, let me actually go to the website real quick. So we'll redirect you to this GitHub repository. A gentleman, his name is Paul Jeremy, he created a website that is driven by this GitHub repository. I am one of the contributors, as you see in there, but by far, it is his project and tons and tons and tons of references that he is actually putting in his website. So if you look and you click on the website, this is indeed a list, not a complete list, but absolutely a list of cybersecurity regulations that exist out there. Sorry, not regulations. It's top of mind because I was actually talking about regulations yesterday, but certifications, professional certifications. So as you see, there are a lot of them. Now, the beauty of this page is that he was able to separate or organize these certifications on somewhat of a roadmap depending on the concentration that you want to concentrate. So forensics, incident handling, penetration testing, exploitation, you see a lot of bubbles in there. Security architecture, engineering, asset security, security risk management, network security. I mean, there's a lot of them. But if you go to the left, and my monitor here is not rendering correctly, but there you go. If you look at the left, there's a somewhat of the demarcation line between beginner, intermediate, and expert. It is somewhat of a fictional line in there because it all depends. So which one will you recommend? I can't recommend a specific certification here, but I can tell you some of the most popular and my own guidance on how you should create your roadmap. The first thing that I always say is start with the fundamentals. If you don't understand, and you don't have to be a CCIE, right, type scenario, but if you don't understand networking, then start by just reviewing networking, right? Getting good handles on networking. And I'm not talking about, yes, getting like route reflectors with BGP, and no, not like that, right? And not to that level, but, subnetting, basic, networking, how networking works in the cloud, virtual tunnels, VLANs, VXLANs, all those type of concepts start, because absolutely everything is connected to a network. Second one is Do you need to know programming languages? The generic answer is no, but that's very generic because it all depends. If you want to go to exploit development, well, absolutely you need to know programming languages and be very, 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 very good at them, because not only you're going to create code, but you're going to be reverse engineering and, you know, again, deducting what are vulnerabilities you can exploit from a system. But if you're doing, for example, uh, just basic, pen testing for web applications and so on, you don't have to be a super programmer, but having a good background of any programming languages, and the people, most people actually, start with Python, that actually will help significantly. It will definitely help. But the number one thing that you start to actually or to develop, and this is with experience, not with like a course, is your analytical mindset, is troubleshooting, and it's practicing, practicing, practicing. This is like math. The more that you practice, the better that you become, right? So these in here will give you somewhat of that roadmap. They actually include like programming language somewhere in between in there, and some of the like security plus and some of the networking certifications in there too. You are the owner of your career, right? You know um, how much time you have, and that's another concept that I want to actually put in here. It is not about paying for certification and or that one certification is more sexy or more well known, etc. It is actually your time, right? And time is money. If you're gonna dedicate your next 6 months preparing for certification to then shift your career, and especially how fast technology is moving today, um, you probably have to pick, the one that will get you the most returning investment. And then, as a matter of fact, I have talked to so many people recently, and where whenever they ask me, "Hey, should I get this certification or should I actually go to a university and do a 2-year program?" They probably have a bachelor's degree, they want to get a master's degree, and so on. And again, it all depends on their scenario. So we walk them, through their scenario, and it's our colleagues of mine in my company and a few others, outside of Cisco, and and basically we go over, and in some cases you can do both. As a matter of fact, there's an organization called SANS and another one called Easy Council, but both of them, they have undergraduate and graduate programs, so you can get a master's degree, and at the same time you're actually taking their certification, so you're kind of paying, and in some cases your company will cover tuition reimbursement. And that's one thing. Each of these certifications, every time that I hover over them, you see a price, right? So, 450, 25.99. There's another one, 2,500, $1,000. You get the point in here, right? So, depending on the geographical location that you are, this may be very, very hard to also monetarily obtain, right? So you have to actually take it into consideration. But you know what? You know what is free? They're blueprints. So what I always recommend people to do is go to all these certifications you may think about, taking, whether it's OSCP, which is very popular for pen testing, or PenTest Plus, or CCNA, anything of these. They have a blueprint. In some cases, they call it a syllabus, and it's basically the areas that they're gonna ask you questions about, and the things that you need to know for the exam. If you see that 2 or 3 of them have the same concepts or the same type of domains, if you will, and subdomains, definitely prioritize that, because that's something that you need to know for cybersecurity, right? Or for any of the concentrations. And that is actually free. And then from there, you start developing your knowledge and so on. And then the beauty that you have here in O'Reilly is that you have access to pretty much all the books, all the practice exams for certifications, these live trainings, video on demand, the labs that I showed you earlier, that are on demand, and those are, of course, you have access to them as long as you have their subscription. But a lot of people, they're actually even driven to here to pass certifications and so on. And I wish, I had all these resources whenever I got started, to be honest. I'm kind of jealous. Now, to give you somewhat of a more perspective of things, right? So, or at least give you some examples. CompTIA, very, very popular, vendor neutral certification body. They have a learning path, if you will, that starts with the IT fundamentals, A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and then you divide into 2 intermediate certifications. One of them that is really popular for pen testing nowadays for people that are getting started is PenTest Plus. And another one that is very, very popular that people take after that is the OSCP certification, but I'll get to that in a second. Now, you can use this guide for this class. As a matter of fact, that is, again, the beauty of O'Reilly, that you get access to all these materials. This is a book that I prepared for PenTest Plus. Again, you can or you cannot use it. My book, doesn't matter. But at least you can use it as a guide, if you will, too, right? Now you have 2, the lab guide and this one, that you can go into a lot more detail, especially since we only have 8 hours here for today and for tomorrow. I strongly suggest, whether you're taking the certification or not, to actually review the concepts in this book. The other thing is, as I mentioned, the Offensive Security Certified Professional, and there are many others that Offensive Security actually offer. Those are very popular. Again, they're not the only ones. There's so many of them, as you saw in there, that they're alternatives. The difference between this one and PenTest Plus is that for this one, you have to complete a series of scenarios in a lab. You have 24 hours to complete that and create a report about the findings. So it makes it really real, right? It's very practical. The PenTest Plus, they do have performance-based questions. So you may have examples of a payload or even an exploit, and you have to refresh your knowledge on for that one for sure, for Python and JavaScript and PowerShell and so on. You don't have to be an amazing expert, but you probably have to put an exploit that the code is out of order, kind of in order, so or you explain what the code is actually doing from a high level perspective and so on. And many scenarios on web application hacking, API hacking, reconnaissance, post-exploitation, creating payloads, and so on. So definitely the lab guide for today will help you. It will not be the only thing that you will need, but it will definitely help you whenever you're preparing for certifications like these ones, like the OSCP, or for the PenTest Plus or the CEH Practical and so on, right? And we also have another boot camp that we're actually teaching here that is actually 3 days. GIAC is the certification body for SANS, and they have a plethora, and I'm talking about a lot of certifications, and a lot of them also relate to ethical hacking, pen testing, red teaming, and some of them that are just concentrating post-exploitation, right? So they are very expensive. So they do their own training, and basically for each of the trainings they have a test. But they're also a part of a curriculum that they offer for like master's degree program and so on. So a lot of people actually participate in those programs, like a 2-year, 3-year, program, and then part of that is actually passing these certifications. So just for your knowledge, I have a few references in your slides. Now, hacking is a lot, and I'm talking about a lot more than just cool tools, cool certifications, and so on. It is about the methodology. It is about researching, a lot of research, a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of frustrations, a lot of patience, thinking like an attacker, thinking how an attacker will actually manipulate a system. What are the features of a system that can be a feature for an attacker, right? And then also combining social engineering with technical capabilities as well. Just keep that in mind. I'm going to probably remind you of this like 3 times during the course. Now, there are a lot of different methodologies out there that the industry has actually contributed to, whether is the penetration testing execution standard, and that's actually something that the community put together as a free resource in the in accessible publicly, or the OWASP testing guide. And OWASP, if you're not familiar with it, let me actually introduce it to you. You're gonna definitely become really familiar with OWASP by the end of the training. But they actually stand now, that's actually an older logo, but they stand by the Open Worldwide, they used to be Web, but the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. Why worldwide instead of web? Because they go beyond web applications. They also cover IoT, now LLMs, and many other different types of guidance and best practices and tools that they actually offer to the world and to the community. So the other two are also very popular, but pretty high level. Actually, specifically the NIST one is so NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have a special publication 800-115, and that is a technical guide for information security testing that provides an overall high level overview of an assessment of a test or an application or a system. Now, if you look at the screen here, it gives you a high level overview of the pen testing lifecycle. You have pre-engagement tasks, and these are the most boring parts of a pen test engagement or a red team engagement, or even of course, a bug bounty, because it applies to all of them. And it is probably the most important. And again, yes, it is probably the most boring, but the most important. Why the most important? Because it's the one that is probably going to keep you in business and out of jail. This is where you start actually talking about scoping. And I'm doing this with my mouse in here because I'm not at home today traveling. But I'm going to try to put here scope. Why I'm doing this so slow? Because it's so important that you know about this. Scope is definitely what is going to keep you in business and out of jail. That is the permission that they're giving you to do or not do things to a system or to a network or to a web application or to a cloud service. And that is all part of pre-engagement tasks. And of course, you have your SOWs, the statement of work, how you're going to get paid, the time that you're going to do that work, the call that rules of engagement, escalation point of contact in case things go wrong. Believe me, in many scenarios, things may go wrong, right? And many other elements in there, right? Or non-disclosure agreements and so on. Now we are going to concentrate here today, and especially in your lab guide, in the middle part. Oh my goodness, it's painful with my touchpad. There you go. The during the pen test, the technical elements of it. So gathering intelligence, we call that reconnaissance. So active or passive reconnaissance. In this case, they put threat modeling in here, but basically is that your attack plan, how you're actually going to be manipulating the systems and so on. And then hopefully you find vulnerabilities and you exploit those vulnerabilities. And then depending on the scope, you can then do post-exploitation activities like lateral movement and compromise other systems, exfiltration, obfuscation, command and control, privilege escalation, the list goes on and on and on. And you're going to be learning about a lot of those here today and tomorrow, especially the post-exploitation tomorrow. Then at the end, depending on the engagement, you create a report. That report will vary depending on the scenario. That report in a traditional pen test may be a PDF that you distribute out to your client. In the case that you're hired as a full-time employee, you may not be putting reports in PDFs. You may be filing bugs to a bug tracking system and then putting those details in there. And in some areas, actually, you may be actually putting the bugs for the developers to fix the issue, and then the exploit in another kind of vault, if you will, because in some cases you do not even share the full exploit with the rest of the development community in your company and so on, right? This is very sensitive information, right? So I'm gonna go over many real life scenarios. And again, even though we have slides and lab guides and scenarios and labs, blah, 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 the thing that I want to at least give to you here, because you can find a lot of this stuff everywhere, right? But the thing that is, I think, I believe more valuable for you is the true real life experience and scenarios that I will give you, and the stories that hopefully will not be boring to you, right? So whenever we start talking about getting started and so on, a lot of people ask me, okay, so what are the ways that you can get higher on this thing, right? So I always tell people that there are three ways that you can get started with, red teaming, pen testing, etc. One of them is to get hired by a company and then you become a consultant doing pen testing for another company. That's how I got started. I got started at Cisco, not in pen testing, but close to 25 years ago. I was in the Marine Corps before, and Cisco was a lot smaller than what it is right now. And I was actually supporting their newer security products, firewalls, IDS, etc. And then I wanted to learn more about truly how attackers will do this and will do it to systems. So I went to an organization that now is very big at Cisco. We acquired many companies after that. But we used to call it the Worldwide Security Practice. And in there, I became a consultant. And basically, we hire other, and I just saw MT Simplify, do or die. So that's the same for folks in the Marine Corps, for those of you that I know that we have an international audience in here. But, and if you're a Marine, Simplify Devil Dog. but, but at any rate, that caught me out of surprise in there. The, the way that I got started in that scenario is that we were growing the business, and literally, one day I will be in a bank doing a pen test. The next day I will be doing an assessment in a government organization. The next day will be in a manufacturing plant. The next day will be in another technical company or an industry peer. And the next day will be actually Cisco, hire Cisco to actually do something within the organization. It was very, very, very diverse, and it still is. We still do the service. But it was overwhelming. I was on the road 100% of the time. But besides that, right? Actually, you know what? Let me give you the real McCoy here. Whenever you get to do this type of work, it is very exciting work. It is very, very, very exciting work. It's like you're living inside of the movie, right? I mean, that's why I describe my work to my wife. In some cases, she's not technical, and in some cases, I say, "Hey, yeah," she doesn't even ask me what I do for a living anymore. Or how was the day? In most cases, actually, I don't even cannot tell her, what happened, but it's very exciting. So subsequently, um, if you're a nerd like me, you get excited and everything else, and you get burned out. There's a lot of burnout and in the cybersecurity careers, and the highest is in ethical hacking, pen test, and consulting type work, right? I don't want to scare you instead of actually motivate you, but again, I'm giving you as it is, right? So a lot of these, whenever I started, of course, I gained so much knowledge and from many different environments, and I still do. I don't do pen testing or red teaming anymore for living. I'm overseeing a few teams that actually do that, but it was definitely one of the best places in my career. Now, the reason that I'm mentioning that story is because that's not the only one that you can get started, right? You can get hired as a full-time pen test or red teamer inside of a company. And by the way, actually I have a team. By the way, actually we're hiring for that team right now. Called ASIC, the Advanced Security Initiatives Group. As a matter of fact, I am in Knoxville, Tennessee today at a mini offsite that we have called the Offensive Summit. And that team, which is about is quite a few people, about 80 people or so. And we have many of them, at Cisco. But this one specifically is tasked to find zero-day vulnerabilities in Cisco products and services before the bad guys do. Full time, 100% of the time, they work as a team, and they don't have to travel. It's all local, and they have an open book. We give them access to the source code. We give them access to everything. Some of them, we go in both angles. So a team with access to the source code, let's say in an assessment of a product or a service, and then other ones that actually come from a black box perspective or from the outside, right? So in those scenarios, those are other ways that you can absolutely get started. But by far, the third one and more popular that you can get started is a bug bounty, right? This is whenever you can go to companies like HackerOne and BugCrowd. And by the way, I can go to my GitHub repository now and at least highlight a section here called bug bounties. And in there, you actually see a few tips, a few write-ups that actually a few colleagues of mine have created. As a matter of fact, I was very honored and blessed to be presenting last Friday at the Kennedy Space Station, and a few of the people that actually wrote a few things in here were there. And Jason Haddix, Nahamsek, or Nahamsek is that's his handle, but his name is Ben. They're very, very, very popular bug bounty people, right? Jason Harris was actually the CISO of Ubisoft, and now he actually owns his own company and does training, etc. But they made a career in bug bounties. But this is the disclaimer: not everybody can make a career in bug bounties. Most people actually get started with bug bounties, but as either a hobby, just to learn, just to get a couple of CVs or experience in there, so they can put in resume and they get a job. But it is, it is pretty crowded, if you will. There's a lot of people doing this. So the folks that are doing $1 million a year, right? Those are very, very few. Even though there are several, including Ben. He even has like YouTube videos on how he makes $1 million, whatever. It's like too much. But anyways, we have put together a series of like tips how you get started, the life of a bounty hunter, and then I have a link to a repository that if you open it, I'm opening it in a different window here. It has tons, and I'm talking about tons and tons. These are hundreds. I'm not exaggerating. I'm still scrolling, and I'm not even halfway. Of write-ups of things that people have found, so vulnerabilities that people have found and how they found them in different real life scenarios. Like, for example, just super random, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but you see, clickjacking and cross-site scripting on Google.org, right? And then Ubiquity Bug Bounty Unify generic CSRF, right? And you may say, oh, you're throwing Ubiquity. You're probably going to find Cisco in here. We have several bug bounties. We have BDP, and so on. But yeah, if you want to actually go over and truly learn, instead of a capture the flag or a scenario or a lab like the ones that we're about to give you the next few minutes, I will strongly recommend that you will go over at least some of these in here. It will be very foolish for me to recommend to go through all of them, because I've actually been putting together every single day. But this will actually absolutely give you an idea on what are the true methodologies, the new tools that probably somebody created while they were doing the bug bounty, and now they contributed to the community on how to do many different things. Like, have in front of me subdomain takeover of Starbucks, right? Part 2. I guess there are two of them. So this is actually something that is very invaluable. I personally, after all these years, still go to this list, and then I say, oh, these are very nifty techniques that everybody. This is one thing that I want to highlight in here. And sorry that I'm giving all these stories, but this is super important. Nobody, and I repeat, nobody is an expert on cybersecurity. Nobody. If you are like a super big expert, then we will We will not need cybersecurity. We will solve this thing. I'll be drinking margaritas in the middle of the ocean right now. Um, so there are two things in life that will humble you significantly. One is cybersecurity, and the second one is AI. You combine the two, it's like even, you're throwing everything, outside. So technology is moving a lot faster. You will never will be able to catch up with technology. You have to augment yourself. And yes, people are gonna say, should you use AI for? Yes, you have to actually embrace AI for two reasons. To one, accelerate the things that you're doing for sure. Whether it's doing a pen test faster, summarizing your report, completely creating and automating agents, to do that, because a lot of the chatbots and everything were kind of 2023ish. Now is the time of true putting actions into these implementations. And the more important aspect of it is to truly learn how to attack AI systems. That's what I'm doing full time right now for my job. So again, information is passing too much, and it is something that you are constantly learning, and you will not learn everything. So very frustrating, I know. Been doing this for 25 plus years, and every day you have to actually learn. I cannot sugarcoat it. But anyways, going back here, that's the segue from the bug bounty write-ups. There's a whole bunch of platforms. Platforms are companies that basically, as another company, you can crowdsource this to. There are a few popular ones in here. Let me show you an example, because I was actually showing it yesterday, and I have it like in my history here. And Bugcrowd, and again, I'm not sponsoring anybody. I'm going to mention Bugcrowd and HackerOne, right? But there's a whole bunch of them here. But Bugcrowd and HackerOne are definitely the most popular one. And full disclosure, I actually know the person that created Bugcrowd. His name is Casey Ellis. We have done presentation together at DEF CON. As a matter of fact, last year we were presenting at the policy desk together. And then Alex Rice from HackerOne. So if you know him, tell him that I say hi, because I'm actually going to talk to him in RSA in a couple of weeks. So, or in a few weeks. So at any rate, I'm not sponsored by any of these things. It can be anything, right? I just have Bugcrowd in front of me because I was going over in a different presentation about secure the government. And the joke that you always hear is that, and I always make this lame story, that imagine 10 years ago, if you actually go on a date, and if it's your first date, and the person you're dating is asking you, hey, what did you do today? And you said, well, I just hacked the Department of Homeland Security, and then I got paid for it. The other person probably is going to say, man, who recommended me to, or introduced me to this idiot? Or he's like crazy, right? And he was trying to impress me, or it's a joke, and they would just laugh. Right? And they would say, oh, seriously, I actually hacked the Department of Labor yesterday, right? And then the person, probably will stand up and leave, and there goes your date, right? Well, not anymore, my friends, because that's actually something that has been going for a long time. You can get these bug bounty platforms or hire pen testers, of course, but like you randomly pick a place that you want to actually potentially hack, and then find vulnerabilities and demonstrate what an attacker can do. You can absolutely do that with permission, and that, my friend, is the difference. So Department of Labor. Oops, I click on the dictionary instead of that. So the Department of Labor, along with many others, will have guidelines of what you can do, what you cannot do, and what are the things that are in scope. As a matter of fact, this one is actually pretty cool, because there's a lot of things that are in scope in here. So you see a lot of websites in here. So DOL, so that's Department of Labor in the US, veterans.gov, Gov loans. Actually, I didn't know that they had veterans.gov under them. But youthrules.gov, just the list is pretty lengthy. It's actually pretty good. So again, you can go over, pick today whatever domain you actually want, and then absolutely obey what type of vulnerabilities. Definitely do not do denial of service attacks or physical access, of course, to find your way through where some of the offices are, and then actually do a physical pen test. And the reason that they probably have it here, guess what? Probably somebody already tried. That they thought that because of the bug bounty that was allowed because it was not specified. You never know, right? But social engineering, manipulating an employee and so on, that is absolutely nothing. That most bug bounties will not allow you to do that, right? And so, and as a matter of fact, this is VDP, is not even a full-fledged bug bounties. Now, there are two types of bug bounties. Public, right? Things that you can actually find, something like that. And actually, most of these are VDP. VDP is Vulnerability Disclosure Program or policy. But several of these, actually the majority of them, are private. And what is a private bug bounty? This is actually whenever you have the bug bounty that is managed by any of these companies for a specific other company like Google or Starbucks. You saw some in there, or Cisco. We have several. We have a couple of public, and most of them are private, on where people are getting invited. So if you get somewhat of a quote unquote reputation, and I think Bugcrowd changed the name from reputation to they just call it points now. So you see the leaderboard, right? So this is actually for March all time. Oh yeah, he's still in the top. So this person that you see there today is new. His name is Eric. I interview him whenever the pandemic hit, and again I was streaming the Red Team Village from my house, and I was interviewing him because he was the top and is still the top in Bugcrowd, and I think HackerOne still too, right? I mean, he is the example of like the people that are making a lot of money with bug bounties, right? And I'm talking about a lot of money. And his story is amazing because he didn't even know anything about pen testing whenever he got started, or even security. And so it's a good story. Again, it's in YouTube. I'm not gonna bore you with more stories in here today. But you can just search for either my name and Eric, or Today's New, or Red Team Village, and you'll find it. But anyways, these leaderboards have some points. Some points in the case of Bugcrowd, it allows you to keep up with some type of quote unquote reputation, right? That then you start to get invited to private bug bounties, and then some of these private bug bounties, and especially in the case of HackerOne, they have a program called Clear, and Bugcrowd probably have some similar like that. I'm very sure that they do. But in the case of HackerOne, they call it Clear, and basically you have to pass not a clearance like a security clearance in the US, but a background check before you even get access to. Because in some cases you need to get access to an application and user credentials and so on. Right? So actually not in some, in a lot of different enterprise applications like that you want to test. So again, this is bug bounties, tons of resources. This life cycle applies to all of them. Whether you're putting a report in a website through HackerOne, Bugcrowd, Integrity, CNAC, to a bug bounty report, or a PDF, or a bug in your organization, the stuff in the middle and the pre-engagement is very similar across the board. You have to obey a scope. You still have to do reconnaissance. You have to find vulnerabilities. You have to exploit them, and depending on the scope, you can move to post-exploitation. With that, I know that we're past the top of the hour. I am going to give you a break, but before we go into a break, hopefully this also kills some time. I was actually giving you this first hour for you to prepare your environment, Websploit labs. Again, it's not mandatory, and I'm using PK's word, but of course it's suggested that if you want to complete the lab, that's the core, the rest of the training, that you set up an environment. Can you put Kali for the first few exercises only and then set up Websploit? Yes, because the first exercise that you're going to be doing, and it's a little bit lengthy, but it's also to make sure that I know everything that I said is in the lab guide with more information, like command call containers, so you can see your containers. All this is like very, very, very self-explanatory, right? Even looking at the ports that are used by web applications and introduction. We're going to introduce a Nmap later and some of the scanners. But the first exercise after you set up the environment is passive reconnaissance and open source intelligence. Now, I know that some of you are still setting up your environment based on the things that I saw in the Q&A panel. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes. For those of you that are ready, then complete exercise 1. And then even please read through the instructions, even though those are some of the boring, but at least it gives you some of an introduction. Even though whenever we come back, I'm going to start talking about open source intelligence. I'm going to give you a lot of additional resources and references to other on-demand videos and labs and things that you can do to practice in each of the sections, right? So several for reconnaissance, and then whenever we go over exploitation, several for like web application and so on. So please, please, please read a lot of, actually all of it is step by step, right? And they have different sections. The first section, exercise 1A, is using a tool called Recon-ng. Once we come back, I'll walk you through the lab guide and I'll explain what those scenarios are. So absolutely, it's not like I'm just giving you the lab guide and go, right? But let me look for that timer. I am going to push a timer in your screen. It's a 15-minute timer. Use this in combination, or this break in combination of the lab for your bio break. Feel free to stretch, get a cup of coffee, glass of water, and then I'll talk to you back in 14 minutes and 48 seconds. Have fun. All right, there's just a few seconds left in that timer, so let me actually start sharing my screen real quick. And as I mentioned to you, that break was a combination of a bio break and your first lap, and of course, for those of you that were still finishing setting up the environment to do so. But let me actually walk you through Reconnaissance, and especially open source intelligence and the first exercise of Recon-ng. And I'm going to start with passive reconnaissance or open source intelligence and what that is. Let me go back to the slides real quick. And if you look at, let me script a little bit of this. We already went over all these. Give me 1 second. But if you look at the reconnaissance section here of what is a passive reconnaissance or open source intelligence is actually basically looking for publicly available information without actively performing a scan or launching any tools against the victim or the target system or the network. And examples of that is actually using Google, right? Using search engines. And there's a feature technique, whatever you want to call it, called Google hacking database or the Google hacking database. And remember that website that we went through, ExploitDB? If you go to this section of the website, right here, and remember that this website was, full of exploits that people actually will contribute to, and so on. We cover that in the beginning of the course. Well, here there's another section that is called the Google hacking database, and it is a series of examples of search strings that you can use to find very sensitive information or vulnerable servers, even passwords, and so on. As a matter of fact, if you actually filter or search for the word password, you see files containing user information, sensitive directory, files containing passwords. I filter or click on that, will filter to all of these. And I'm just going to randomly pick a couple. Doesn't show them, but there we go. So what you see here is that somebody, again, I'm just clicking randomly. So this was actually back in 2021, but I guess, the date is here 2021, but it says published here in 2022. But this person, they said, okay, if you actually use in Google, in title, index of HTTP password, you may find a few things. If you click on that, it just takes you to Google, and then in my case, is doing the generative AI. But actually, let's see how he explains it. The index command should the HTTP password shows the name, the last modified time, and the size description of the files in that directory. For example, that's just pretty cool because actually even tells you, what potentially HTTP password is, right? But as you see here, some of the results, right, may be examples, like probably this Fedora Linux Perl Apache HTTP password is just the documentation, but some of them may include actually somebody's password, like Reza Abbasi. So not because you're actually seeing this publicly available information in Google, you have access and permission. Well, you definitely have access to it, but not permission to use them, right? So always obey scope, and definitely if you find information that is not related to the assessment that you're doing, or if you work higher or permitted by a company and so on, or even if you're doing it against yourself, right? I mean, that's the perfect way to start, is actually doing reconnaissance and open source intelligence yourself, right? But if you're starting to find, I don't know, your ex-boyfriend, your ex-girlfriend, your co-workers, your ex-boss, don't be, using that information without absolutely permission, right? Now, if somebody actually that and so on, of course, contact them and say, hey, this information is actually publicly available there. I just came across it. That's responsible or coordinated disclosure, just like any other issue, like especially in vulnerabilities. Right? But again, there are many of them. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time in here, but you see, tons of other search strings. This is what we call Google dorks. So you see here, Google dork. It's basically the search string to actually put in Google to find, interesting stuff like that, including passwords. Now, that's not all, of course. That's only one out of hundreds of different things that you can gather. Other things are DNS records. It can provide you significant information about different things out there. Shodan is another example. Shodan, let me take a moment to explain what that is. Let me go to my browser again. Where is my browser? Here. If I go to Shodan.io, it will take you to this page. And Shodan is an organization. It used to be an individual a long time ago, but it's now an organization that is super popular. Many companies, including mine, they use this information for what the industry now talks about attack surface management. It's basically, think about you are taking a selfie from the internet down to your organization, right? And it's because this is how you are exposed and your systems are exposed in the internet. And believe me, there are a lot of systems that should never be exposed to the internet that they are, and then you can find them here. So so what this organization is doing is scanning the whole internet 24/7, and then putting the results of that scanner in a database, and then you can query that database through either this page or through APIs. Most people actually are using it through APIs, right? However, they do have a pricing thing, right? Right now, for free, you can actually say, okay, tell me all the devices that are running Telnet, use an insecure protocol, and there's 191,000 of them running. Argentina apparently has a whole bunch of them, and China, right? And then in any of these, actually, this is pretty crappy, unless it's a honeypot. But as you see, some of these systems may be running very old pieces of software, and then also many other ports. And in this case, you even see access to a camera. I was not even expecting. I just randomly, you saw me randomly actually picking that up, and this is indeed a camera, and it looks like from a bank. This is like an ATM machine or something like that. I don't know. It may not be a bank, but kind of looks like one. Now, this is something that is kind of particular and fishy, right? So the first thing is that it says, "Welcome to the Windows CE Telnet service on HEC Dev CE 6.0." Then a login prompt. So that's the act of kind of like banner grabbing from the system. But then if you keep going down up here, this is actually OpenSSH running on Debian, right? And then an FTP server. But the thing that threw me here, and again, we're not doing any assessment here. I'm not gonna go beyond this. I'm not gonna interact with this IP address. I'm not gonna do that. This is only the results. If you see my URL in here, I'm just in Shodan, right? So you see Shodan.io host 77.19.224 or 244.6. So because I'm seeing this, I'm like, okay, that may be a legit finding because there's some type of image in there, but it may be a honeypot. Why do I say that? Well, Windows CE is super old. Hopefully nobody's using this, but definitely people are. That's a Windows service, but then Debian, and it may be something that is in between that is actually using all these. It's a permutation of services, again. But in some cases, what I'm going at is that some of the results that you're gonna get are either false positives or honeypots. And honeypots are systems that you can put intentional vulnerable systems you can expose to the internet to attract network traffic from attackers. So then you can start um, learning and understanding the tactics and techniques. Or probably you're creating custom IPS signatures and you're exposing it out and you're testing those. So all that for sure, can be a thing. This one probably not. You have to do a little bit more investigation, and we're not going to do that in here. And now, even though you see that I have the results of the scan, and you see even a picture of a potential camera that was exposed, and so on, I am not sending a single packet there. The owner of the systems don't know that I'm doing this, even in front of a video, or a class in here, right? All this is passive reconnaissance, open source intelligence, and it's yet kind of like the third, the fourth thing that I actually just mentioned here, right? If you go to my GitHub repository, oh, and by the way, Shodan is not the only one, right? There's also called gray noise. See if I put it correctly. There we go. So gray noise intelligence is a company, but the tool, the people just refer to as just short by gray noise. Yet is another company that is doing basically the same thing. You can also search for free in some instances. If I actually click on here and then type telnet, this one actually has 187,000 results. How many of them were in Shodan? 191. Very close, actually. Not terribly bad. And then you see some of them are malicious. 183,000 of them. Malicious and spoofable, blah blah blah. They have a lot of different statistics from the top organizations. There's some from Iran. We click on that, of course, we'll um, filter to a specific country and so on. So guess what? Not only you and me are doing this, but not only ethical hackers are doing this. Definitely, attackers are using these systems for sure. Dual nature of technology, just like AI, you're using it for summarization. Well, an attacker can be used for phishing, right? It is what it is, right? Also, law enforcement uses a lot of open source intelligence and human intelligence as well. Now, if you go to my GitHub repository, so remember, hackerrepo.org will redirect you to my GitHub repository. I have a section called OSINT. And in there, I start introducing the same thing that I just mentioned to you right now, so you can skip that. And then you see a lot of other tools that are not in your slides, right? And a lot of different websites and techniques. We went over the Google hacking database. This is actually just this one, but for Websploit exploration and for certificate information and so on, you see all these that are here for your reference. And this is by far not a complete list. Now, I also want to draw your attention to one specific resource in here, and that is the OSINT Framework. So if you click on that, I'm going to open it in a new tab. You see a beautiful visualization of many different elements that you may want to find information about, right? From people search engines, right? So if you go to general people search engines, tons of them, registries, to public records. And if you live in the US and you go to these, whether it's patent records, voter records, US county data, most definitely if you live in the US, very, very easily I can find where you live, if you own a house, how much you pay for it, probably if depreciated or appreciated, if you owe taxes or not. All that is public information. Even if you made an enhancement to the house, many counties and many states, that's actually public information. So scammers do that all the time, or use that all the time to, do a lot of scams. That's why you also get a lot of junk mail in the mail, right? I mean, open source intelligence is not like a only hacker thing. I mean, everybody's using this thing and exploiting this for some reason, right? Whether it's a scam or to sell you something, and so on. So a lot of this stuff is actually public information that you can start putting together. Now, imagine if you have the ability to combine AI with the results of open source intelligence. Well, of course you can. And let me actually do a live demo. And this one, my friends, I'm going to go with the demo gods in here. But let me, bear with me just 1 second before let me see, demo. Yes, okay. As a matter of fact, I already have a few things in here. Give me 1 second. All right. So before I go over my terminal, and I'm just using here my Mac terminal. You don't even have to use a fancy Websploit or and so on. But I'm gonna just give you this story and this demo using just a Mac, right? Let me start with the story, and that starts with certificates, digital certificates. One of the things that you can absolutely use for open source intelligence is digital certificate information. I also mentioned DNS. You saw the stuff with Shodan. You saw the stuff with other DNS or Google, dorks and so on. Well, I'm only gonna concentrate now in certificate, but the reason that I'm mentioning that is because the power of about what I'm about to show you extends way beyond the lame demo that I'm gonna do to you, give you, and probably even this lame demo is gonna open your eyes, right? Hopefully. So let's start with the story. Certificate transparency. In the world of digital certificates, nothing is immune to vulnerabilities. Back in 2011, DigiCert and DigiNotar, two of the most popular certificate authorities, providers out there, got totally pawned, right? They got breached. And one of the issues, and it's actually not a breach like between records, but manipulating of the CAs. And one of the challenges, was that people didn't have a way to be able to verify if a certificate was indeed generated by a legitimate certificate authority, because if those certificate authorities were compromised, then you didn't have that transparency, if you will. Well, in around the same year, Google and a whole bunch of companies actually came together and created this concept called certificate transparency. Now, I have a personal blog. From time to time, I put information there. It's called becomingahacker.org, and it will redirect you to this blog, right? So if I keep going, I'm putting a lot of things in there about walkthroughs of Websploit and a lot of things about AI and blah, blah, line chain and so on. But if you keep going, actually, let me just search it. Cert, there you go. So back in September, I created this tool, and this is actually back in September. Sounds like a long time, but not that big. I created this tool, and yes, AI generated images to explain the certificate transparency capability. And again, this is not new. This has been going on for quite some time. But how attackers and how ethical hackers can actually use certificate transparency logs as a really, really good source of information for mapping different environments. I'm talking about really, really, really good information. There are a whole bunch of tools out there, right? There's a website called crt.sh, but I wanted to create a very lightweight tool that then I can use for many other purposes, right? So I call that Cert-spy, and basically I'm just using cert.sh information. Like, I'm just collecting information from there for any certificate. And it's really easy. You can actually pip install Cert-spy and you get the rest. I mean, everything is in my GitHub repository, and I'll paste this in the group chat in here just for your reference. I saw a question. Now, if you have a question for me, please, do so in the Q&A panel, because that allows me to track whether I have answered your question. Luckily, I just saw yours, SS. Is Shodan safe to access from your local system? I just access it, so, and I do this. And the answer is yes. Most security companies, most companies are actually using Shodan. So it's not like you're going to get infected by something. Now, after you click on any of the results and you're exiting Shodan, that's a different story, right? I can put, believe me, attackers put things that are exposed to the internet, just like you saw in Gray Noise, and some of them may be malicious, right? Again, that's why it's good to know about the tools, you get to know about the results. I didn't go to it, like even that, and I just saw CI says, gas station. It actually, yeah, it looks indeed like a gas station or like a teller, one of those drive-throughs. But even if I wanted to click on that and there was, a decoy for me to get pawned and somebody actually steals my session cookies of my applications, that's a different story. But Shodan itself, or through the API, it is not malicious, right? Just the results may lead you to a malicious site. So you have to be careful, always. All right, so Cert-spy, going back, I pasted the link in the group chat. That's why I saw your comments and question. If I go to my terminal window, I already have it installed here, I think. I'm traveling today, so I'm literally doing this. Let me see. Oh yeah, I already have one. As a matter of fact, I was actually doing this demo a couple of days ago. And but let me go over this thing. Cert-spy is going to give me information about certificates, just like you saw in that GIF that is still going on in the back of the screen here. Let me actually take it, so it will not be distracted from your screen here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. All right, so hopefully you see okay. So what I can do is I can say Cert-spy, and then I had Tesla.com in my example there, and then that will give me tons of information about certificates that have been generated associated to Tesla.com. And you see here, vehicle files, engineering, US, w2.vn.cloud.tesla.com. And you may say, but Omar, sure, you get information about this DNS fully qualified domain name of this application, but that may not be exposed to the internet. You cannot access it, right? If I come here and I probably do a host vehicles.file, and actually this is exposed to the internet through Akamai. Huh. All right, alrighty then. So again, we do not have permission, even though Tesla has a bug bounty, and that's the reason that I picked it, and it's public, and you can do these things, and you can report stuff. But again, we're not doing that in here, right? Just because I haven't even reviewed what's the scope or not the scope. But yeah, I'm doing publicly available information. I'm not hacking Tesla. I'm not hacking anybody. I can do this against Cisco, Meraki, anything that you want me to do, Splunk. But in here, you see the power of actually getting this information. But let me go back to the argument. Omar, what if this is not available to the internet? What is the point? Well, there's a significant value. Because if then I compromise a system that is indeed accessible to the internet, or is a web application, and then I can do lateral movement to this system, I don't have to do a scan that you're going to catch me inside of your organization. I'm going to go straight to vehiclefiles.eng.us w2 vncloud.tesla.com. And again, I'm just picking this as kind of a story so you can see the thing, right? And you see a whole bunch of API gateways, vehicle exit info gateway, blah, blah, blah. Sentry app. Oh, nice. I own a Tesla, so I'm like, okay, that's my Sentry pictures on my car, probably. No, but they're definitely related services. Tesla Tequila, actually, this is awesome. TeslaTequila.com, and so on. So again, all this is digital certificates against that. But Omar, you told me that this is not the true power. You can get AI and do this. Well, if you look at here, I have I think I still have it. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. So I have a permutated version of a library called Open Interpreter, very popular, right? But at the end of the day, behind the scenes, what it's actually doing is LangChain with prompt templates to get inference either from a local open source model or from OpenAI, right? And I have it configured here for GPT-4 API access through OpenAI. And what I did is I modified it to create my own prompt templates that you are an ethical hacker, you are going to be actually doing reconnaissance, you are blah, 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 blah. You're going to give me the output in this format. You're going to summarize in this way with this tone. You can give them a lot of instructions like that, right? And then what I can do is click on this, agent. This is not, again, it's based on Opera Interpreter. I haven't even contributed back, but I just have different agents like this or different permutations of this implementation for different tasks. But this one with my prompt templates over Recon, I can say, oh, and by the way, I saved the results of the Tesla in a file, and I think, damn it, now I completely forgot where it was. Let me do this. CD demo, Tesla data. All right, so it's Tesla data. So if I come here and I said, open the Tesla data file, it includes certificate information. I want to perform, actually I want to, no, or analyze it. You want to analyze data and tell me if there are any sensitive, oh my goodness, sensitive, now it disappeared. Sensitive systems. And my terminal just went crazy, but you will see what it's gonna do. So I said, sure, I can help you with that. Here's a plan, open Tesla.data. Of course, it's actually using LangChain to do the chain of operations. Then it's creating their own prompts. There's, okay, I've opened the file successfully, so you open it. And it appears to be in JSON format. It contains information about that. So it's creating their own code to process it. It already did, even faster than I can actually even explain to you. And there you go, vehicle files, PRN. It's even giving me, information and summarize systems related to fleet management, fleet API, systems related to mobile links. There you go. Systems related to vehicle files. There you go. As a matter of fact, what do you need Omar for this, right? Say, are there any other systems related to dev environments? And then, of course, sure, I can help you with that. It's not telling me go to hell, I'm an AI that is, so of course I'm giving them very specific prompts in my prompt templates that I'm an ethical hacker, blah, blah, blah. But it's giving me the information. I can my API gateway, Hermes, dev Hermes, log collector, external, log transit, mobile links, SSO.dev. Oh, I love it. Raul test, whoever is Raul. Now we're seeing that he has a device there. Again, all this is publicly, once again, publicly available information. Now, this is just certificate transparency. Imagine if I combine that with the results of subdomain enumeration with DNS or any other type of reconnaissance aspect of it. If you think that Omar is doing this and we're like, oh my God, this is crazy. Well, guess what? Attackers are way smarter than me and are probably doing this way better. And especially resourceful attackers like nation state by far are doing things a lot more creative than this, right? That is, my friends, not the attacks of the future, but what we have to think about today, right? And again, I'm not gonna go prompt, and say, okay, scan, because I can do that. I can say, how can I scan this? And it's gonna give me. I'm not gonna, if it starts actually doing some of the systems, of course not. But it's actually explaining things better than I can explain to you. To scan this, you can actually use scanning tools like Nmap, install the network scanning tool. Please confirm that you have the necessary permissions if you want me to proceed with this plan. So basically, it says, I'm going to install Nmap for you, run the network scan on the identified systems. Again, this case, I'm just asking it to do this, right? And it's asking me to confirm. But if I actually have an agent that is completely automated and is doing this, believe me, people are doing this. It is it is overwhelming, right? So, anyways, I'm gonna cancel that. I'm gonna close my lame demo window here, and again, that's the combination. This is not in your lab guide by far, but you see the power of the combination of AI. And in order for you to defend against these things, you have to. And I'm not joking. I mean, this may sound like futuristic and so on, but you do have to use AI. Tons of discussions in this. I do other courses on this stuff and most of these conversations because this is being discussed literally on a daily basis. Last week I was in the Kennedy Space Station, as I mentioned to you, tons of conversations in there, in a conference called Hack SpaceCon. But the day before, I was actually in DC with a whole bunch of industry peers and government organizations talking about the standards of the future, the interoperability for AI, and the things that we need to actually make recommendations super fast on how to protect against these type of attacks. And I'm not even going to attacks yet. This is only reconnaissance, right? And open source reconnaissance. But anyways, tons of other things, dark web tools, and so on. So a lot more than you have in your slides. All right. So talking about tools, what you went through in the lab guide, hopefully at least you did a couple. The first exercise, so 1A, is around Recon-ng. Yet one other tool, right? The first one that you saw, Cert-spy, I created a lame tool, but gets you a lot of information. The second one, I also created it. Well, I guess I modified it. I didn't create it from scratch. I'm leveraging Open Interpreter, and then I modified it for my own use cases. But I'm using, nowadays everything is being abstracted significantly, right? So behind the scenes, that thing is using LangChain, it's using prompt templates from it. It's creating agents, as you saw the prompts going back, right? So those agents can install a package. You saw creating code to do the assessment of the JSON file. So of course, it's a combination of things. But Recon-ng has existed for quite some time. It is very, very popular, and it still is. So it was, and it still is, and it's very, very simple to use. And from a terminal window, you can just type Recon-ng, especially in Websploit, and then it will start like that, right? And then you have different modules that can be installed. You can type the command marketplace search, and then you see the modules that are available. Some of them are related to DNS. The other thing is that you will see in my notes that I highlight that in the list, you see a column here in this table called D, and that means that there's a dependency that is needed in order to run that module. Like, for example, you see Shodan here, that the dependencies, so you have to have the Shodan API client install. And then the K means that you have to have a key, an API key. But for your purposes, in your lab guide, I didn't require anything that you have to go and register and get an API key. It's all public, and it's basically using, like, the first one is whois, and you see the other one is netcraft. And let me give you, I guess, the good news or bad news. Netcraft. Netcraft is a module in a Recon-ng, but is the name of the module, but it's actually a company, right? And I think that I have the link pointing to the company. Let me see. Yeah, it's right here. So these people allow you to search the web, look for DNS type data, right? So site contains blah, 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 right? And you can do that for domain enumeration and so on. Well, they created a module that can interact with the Netcraft public database. And in some cases, actually in a lot of cases, this module and the connection to the database, it is very unreliable, right? So why did you put it in the lab, you may ask? Well, guess what? One is for you to see and suffer a little bit, because the reality of things in ethical hacking is it's a lot of suffering, a lot of trial and error, and that no tools are perfect, and no tools are or should be used in isolation, or even within a tool, that no module or feature or whatever should be done in isolation or used in isolation. So that's why, in some cases, you may not get these results that you're seeing in the screen here, right? And I'll walk you through. You don't need me for that. It's all part of your lab guide. You see that we did it against hacker.org with the number 4. That's another website that I own. There's another one that I mentioned in the lab guide called secretcorp.org that you also do other reconnaissance. So again, those are the things that I put in there, and absolutely no tools are 100%, just like MA said in the group chat. Now, the other one that you used is Bing. Basically, instead of using Google Hacking Database, now you're using Bing, and you're just getting information about a specific domain, in this case hacker.org, and you see other subdomains that are appearing, like web apps, LBP or LPB, and so on. And then the last one here is using a word list. But this one I'm actually going to be stopping for a little while to explain what a word list is. A word list, just like the word says, is a file that has a whole bunch of words, typically one line after the other, or one word in each line. They can be used for reconnaissance. They can also be used for cracking passwords, or guessing passwords rather, finding files and directories in a web application. Can be for many different things. In this case, we're using it for enumerating, or they call it brute forcing, domain enumeration using DNS. That is actually doing DNS resolutions to all the names that you have in that list, right? Or all the words that you have in that list. So vpn.hacker.org or admin.hacker.org. Whatever you put in that list, it will actually try to do DNS resolution. And if it's successful, then it enumerated a subdomain or a host. There are many, many word lists. There are some that are already, and I explained this in your lab guide, within Talia and Parrot by default, but that I also put or clone a couple of other repositories, including mine, that also has a couple of more word lists that you can use in Websploit, right? However, for the purpose of this, I will not even call it demonstration, because you already did the lab guide, or hopefully you're doing it now. You're going to be using just the default built-in word list for Recon-ng, right? And then you find more information, right? 36 new or 32 new hosts, right? And I go over, how to do show host and so on. I already did a demo of certificate transparency, but I do have the next exercise that is about certificate transparency. And then this is the write-up of installing Cert-spy, not with AI, right? Not the AI part that I just did a few minutes ago, but just to actually get the domain information and reconnaissance information, excuse me, the certificate information with domain names and host names for a given for a given domain name. Oh my goodness, I'm going in circles here. You will allow you to get the certificate information which contains host names based on a given domain that you give it. Oh my goodness. You see, that need to be replaced by AI. so so that's the second part of that exercise one. The second exercise that I'm going to give you some time in here is for you to discover information about this company called Secret Corp. And it's a website that I own called secretcorp.org. And you can actually go and it's kind of like a gamified thing, who's a CEO and who's a sales executive. You have to find the pages, the subdomains that will actually tell you, the other. So basically you're applying what you learn in exercise one and then to this one, and it's just a whole bunch of questions, right? There's for you. There's, again, kind of gamifying the experience in here. The third exercise, it is optional. Actually, all of them are optional, right? You don't have to make them, do them, but it's definitely optional because in some cases, the tool will gather information and the quote unquote scan will exceed even 3 hours. Like literally, we don't have 3 hours left. As a matter of fact, we only have 2 hours left, and I have to give you guys another break to complete the exercises and so on. But in some cases, some of these, will take a long time, depending on the thing. So, but I walk you through what is Spiderfoot, yet another Python tool, very, very powerful. Also, you have to be aware of false positives and so on. But again, everything is step by step in here. You get the point. And then I'm going to combine all this in the next break. Even though you're not going to have enough time in 15 minutes to actually do that, I'm going to kind of accelerate things a little bit so I can then move to active reconnaissance. And then I'll give you another break to actually complete different exercises. So now I'm going to give you a little bit more breaks instead of boring you with stories and so on. Hopefully, I'm not boring you that much. And then giving you a lot more time to complete the exercises. So with that, let me start a timer. And we're talking about doing exercise 1, 2, 3, and 4. You hopefully already completed 1, but 2, 3, and 4 is the next 15 minutes. And also use that for a bio break. So I don't see any questions in the Q&A panel. Thank you again. Have fun, and I'll talk to you then. All right, we only have a few seconds left in that timer, so let me start sharing my screen. And I pasted a few links in your group chat in there. The first two links are two video on demands that go over the details of tons of additional demos. Shodan, we already actually covered, but Maltigo, Amas, more of Recon-ng, and tons of other Recon, tools. And then the second one, so there are two, Cybersecurity Bootcamp and Practical Cybersecurity Fundamentals. Those are available here, again, free with your subscription forever. And then I walk you through different labs. Now, the thing that you're seeing in front of the screen is actually something that is also free that I helped create with Net Academy. And again, Net Academy is really, really popular in the whole industry because we're giving, this is the way that Cisco actually gives back to the community, and tons of people actually start by going over some of these training. But we have one for ethical hacking, and there's over 3 million people that already actually have at least started it, right? I don't know about the completion rate because I'm not on that team, but the last statistics that they gave me is about 3 million people, and that can be, same students, with different accounts, it can be many different things, right? But there are 70 hours of training there, and there are 34 labs. It is self pads, and you get a badge at the end, right? The Network Academy badge in there. Very popular among many organizations and universities out there. And again, it's completely free. Feel free to use it or ignore it, right? Now, the next section is about active reconnaissance. So what that is basically now you're using tools like scanners, also fuzzers in some cases to look for vulnerabilities, for look for open ports, for look for misconfigurations, and so on. There's so many different types of scanners out there. There are, of course, open source scanners and commercial scanners. Nmap by far is the most popular open source scanner. It is not the only one. You have things like the OWASP Z-attack proxy, which is a tool that you're going to be learning about later. It has an automated scanning and crawler feature that is completely free. The whole thing is free. You also have things like Nicto, Nuclear. Nuclear is really popular for finding vulnerabilities, and you can create your own templates and so on. All of those are in my GitHub repository. Now, if I go to the repository, give me 1 second real quick. Now, if you go to the Reconnaissance section, where is it? The word that says Recon. And then I have a few different resources in here. So active and passive reconnaissance tips. Again, a lot of other tools that you're already familiar with. Active reconnaissance, I mentioned Nicto. You're actually going to be playing with Nicto here today. I have a Nmap cheat sheet, Nuclei as well, the OWASP attack proxy, everything that I just mentioned, it is actually here, right? And in Nuclei, I actually have, I clicked on the Nmap cheat sheet. But Nmap, I actually have a cheat sheet. Nuclei is a open source scanner that literally is so popular you can actually just go Nuclei scanner, and you will see a company called Project Discovery. And they have a GitHub organization and a GitHub repository for Nuclei, and you can use Nuclei free of charge. And it allows you to do or to create different templates. This is basically the example of a YAML template to run on a specific target, and then it can be for specific vulnerabilities. You can model it specifically for the type of application that you're scanning to then do different types of operation. Super easy to install, either with Go, like Go install and point it to the repository, or in the Mac, we just brew install Nuclei, or even a Docker repository or a Docker container that you can obtain it from there. And they also have a documentation and read the docs, as you see in here. And again, tons of support that it's actually getting from the community as well. So it's not only about Nmap. That's what I'm going at. Now, in your there we go. In your lab guide, I also have a section that I omitted for AMAS, right? And I do have, actually, this is the old link. Let me go here real quick. I'm just gonna put, yeah, this is the old link for the actual session. But let me go here. There we go. This is a newer link. So this is a conference that we did here in O'Reilly. I'm gonna paste it to the group chat, just in case the other link in your lab guide didn't work, or in your in the lab guide. So this is something that I hosted a few months ago, and there were 3 participants in this conversation. Jason Haddix, again, he's a professional bug bounter. He was a CISO of Ubisoft. I mentioned him earlier. Tons of things that he's given to the community. He actually talked about the strategies that he's actually using for Reconnaissance. The other one is Jeff Foley. He is the creator of this tool, AMAS. And it's a very popular, not only tool, but OWASP project that can be used not only for ethical hacking reconnaissance, but also for attack surface management, right, and continuous assessment of a system. And then the last one here, Sandra, she actually has an amazing story. She is an investigator, owns her own company, works with a lot of multi-billion-dollar companies, government institution, law enforcement, etc. And she very dynamically, goes into some of the tools that she actually uses. In there, again, there's our pretty short conversations, but it gives you a lot of insights. But you will see that in the video, she does not show her face, and it's because this is as real as it gets. She has allowed, people to go to jail, so she has investigated very, 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 very crazy cases, and again, put, I guess, justice in it with the law enforcement of corporate espionage. And so it's not about just finding scammers and everything else. It's pretty sensitive, and that's the reason that she cannot, for her own safety, show her face. But again, this is really, really, really cool kind of conversations. If you actually want to take a moment, it is all free and available here in O'Reilly, again, on demand. And it gives you at least perspective of even the creators of the tools that I'm highlighting here, right? So, but if you go to your and everything is side by side. If you go to the lab guide, I'm gonna skip this just because of time. That's automating Google Dorks. These are just scripts that I actually have created as examples. There you go. Exercise 8. That's active reconnaissance. You're gonna be actually going over Nmap. I have a cheat sheet. It is all linked in your slides, in your, of course, it's in the GitHub repository, in your lab guide, and so on. And basically, you're gonna walk through different scenarios, and no pun intended, because you're actually gonna be doing different scenarios in here in O'Reilly too. But one is the basic scan, the other one is advanced scanning, even how to use Python for that. To be realistic, each of those labs will take you 20 minutes, right? Somewhere there. That's how we put in there. If you actually read everything step by step and so on, we're not going to have enough time in here, but I'm going to give you another 15 minutes for you to complete exercise 9. So exercise 8 is one of the labs, and you can access it there. Exercise 9, and then I talk a little bit about web reconnaissance, and then I'll give you another break for NICTO and so on, because again, it's definitely going to take you more than 15 minutes. So I do have tons of additional references in your slides, you know that you probably already know that I don't like slides a lot. I use them as talking points as reference for you, and I want for you to practice, 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 practice. So with that, let me actually give you that other break for the lab. So again, we're actually doing all exercises all the way to exercise 10. If you, for some reason, have already finished that early, feel free to start exercise 10. But again, we most of you not gonna have time, and it's a 100-page lab guide, right? So with that said, I'll talk to you in 40 minutes and 36 seconds. Have fun. I'll be monitoring any questions in the Q&A panel, and I'll talk to you then. The break is over. Let me actually share my screen real quick. And we're going to pick up from web applications vulnerability scanning because I'm going to combine a few things here right now for your learning. In the previous examples, of course, you went over Nmap, and it was all self-guided. It's all, as a matter of fact, you don't even need Websploit for those labs, as I mentioned, and even for the NICTO one here. But I wanted to at least take a moment to explain a few other concepts other than port scanning or Nmap. The first thing is that whenever you're doing reconnaissance on any application, especially in web applications, the first thing that I would recommend is to start trying to use the application as a user, right? Try to understand what are the different elements that are used for password recovery or authentication, or if by just using the application by itself you understand the potential integrations with other things, and you may say, how are you going to do that? Well, in many cases, let's say I'm just going to do a generic use case, that you have an application that is getting weather information from somewhere else. Most definitely, they have an API to do that, right? Or that you have account provisioning and you have to register, and there's a forget your password button, and so on. Probably you can abuse that type of environment. So that's the first step other than launching scanners. And then you can start launching scanners like NICTO or the OWASP attack proxy. And ZAP is very popular. Again, it's free. But there are many of them out there, right? ZAP is actually part of, again, a project in the OWASP community, but it has gotten a lot of popularity. You can use it as, the user, like, with your Kali or Parrot, system or Websploit and so on, or you can use it headless, basically to automate a lot of the things throughout your security development lifecycle. So in other words, pushing security to the left, that's a concept that people use a lot, but it's putting security tools and automation to work for you as you develop code and as you're committing code, right? So you can integrate with CI/CD pipelines and so on. So definitely, I invite you to actually go beyond, what is of course in the lab guide. Now there is a company that is called Portswigger, and they created a scanner / proxy / multi-tool environment called Burp Suite. You will actually go over and use Burp Suite here, especially the community edition, which is a free edition. However, outside of the actual product, they created a super amazing, and I'm talking about super amazing, free web security academy, if you will, right? And they have tons and tons of labs and the explanations of all these vulnerabilities. And I'm going to paste the link in your group chat as well. But if you if you scroll down in the page, you see that there is even a lab right now, or a series of labs around web LLM attacks. So in other words, how to perform attacks using large language models, and also how to perform attacks against large language models applications, right? And but they have information and labs about API testing, SQL injection, NoSQL injection, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery. If you click on view all the labs, they are very comprehensive. Like if you see dozens and dozens of labs, right? And if you click on any of them, of course, you can access the lab by just clicking in there and register. But if you click on any of the descriptions of what is a vulnerability, like reflected cross-site scripting, it actually gives you a really good explanation of the topic. If you go back, actually, I was just there. It would be just 1 second. If you see, at the beginning of the topic, like cross-site scripting, what it is, they actually have really good documentation and illustrations on what it is. And of course, you have the tons and tons and tons of other references that we have here in this course, in your slides, and in O'Reilly with all the books and everything that I also included here. So that is at least to give you yet more homework after the class. I'm talking about, I'm not exaggerating. You see, there's probably months of trainings in here, right? The other thing that I want to draw your attention to is back to my GitHub repository. If you go under fuzzing, that is another element that I want to explain, right? And I'm going to go and use this somewhat of a slide. A fuzzer is an application that you have in a system that can either generate or use mutated or crafted, messages, packets, etc., to then find vulnerabilities, input validation vulnerabilities in a system, things like buffer overflows, or even vulnerabilities like injection-based vulnerabilities, like command injection or SQL injection, etc. Now, there are 3 types of fuzzing: mutation, generation, and evolutionary. Mutation basically is using samples of valid traffic, right? Valid input, rather, whether it's a web application and an HTTP packet, go into it, or a router and an BGP packet, go into it, or a RIP packet, and and so on, or an application that you created with your own protocol, right? That you have to then create those use cases and I would say test cases, not use cases, right? And then what it does is actually uses that sample to produce malform inputs to that application, and then try to find vulnerabilities into the system, whether it's crashing the application and potentially finding buffer overflows, or finding other types of vulnerabilities, like I mentioned to you, like SQL injection and so on. The second type is called generation-based fuzzers, and this is typically using input from scratch rather than actually mutating an existing input that you give it, right? So it does require some level of intelligence for you to construct the input to at least make some sense to the program. So if the program is expecting, again, a BGP transaction, then of course it has to conform to the BGP packet format, because if not, it's going to be probably dropped, right? Or in some cases not, right? And that may be a vulnerability. So the last one is the more advanced or fancy technique in here, which is evolutionary. Evolutionary fuzzing basically is when the fuzzer, that application, is using feedback from each of the test cases. So basically what you're getting back from the test cases from the victim, from the target system, and then actually it learns the format of the input over time. And there's a lot of research, a lot of even companies are leveraging or trying to leverage generative AI to take evolutionary fuzzing to the next level. Everybody's jumping into this bandwagon, right? So there's a lot of, applicability, and definitely, an attractive use case to use generative AI for fuzzing, right? And you're gonna be learning more about fuzzing, especially in the buffer overflows section and so on. So those are fuzzers, yet another type of technique that you can use for finding vulnerabilities. Now, what I'm doing here, even though I'm combining a few of these things with web applications, is that I know that we only have 1 hour and 5 minutes left, and we're definitely not going to be able to cover everything that is in the lab guide here today. So we're going to table a few things for tomorrow. But at least what I want to do is explain a few of the other concepts. What is a proxy? How do you use it? For what purpose? And so on. And then highlight a few things in the lab guide. And then I'll give you a final break in the next few minutes for you to kind of catch up with the information that I'm about to provide you, and then they will find somewhat of a stopping point after the break. We do a quick Q&A, and then we adjourn, and then tomorrow we'll pick it up from here, and then we shift gears into like networking and Wi-Fi and so on. All right, so we talked about scanning, Nmap, nuclei. Now Nikto is in front of your screen in there. The OSINT attack proxy, Burp suite, and so on. But we have to take it beyond the scanner, right? And what else can you do to do reconnaissance or to understand an application and so on? And especially in web applications, let me go to my slides because it probably makes more sense, even though I'm not using them that much, but I can jump into it. In a web application, if you look at a traditional web application, you have the typical presentation web server, the backend application, and a database, right? That's a typical web application. However, that is changing a lot because not only you have a presentation, front end application, you may have a front end that it has multiple microservices behind it, and then tons of APIs to gather their information from another application. So, of course, the process, the infrastructure, the architecture is changing as we speak, and it has already changed. Things like orchestration libraries, excuse me, like Kubernetes, and so on, have introduced, in the last 10 years, and it's making it easier, and in some cases also easier, not only to deploy but to introduce vulnerabilities, as well, right? So if you're thinking about concentrating as a ethical hacker in web applications, don't stop at the web application or even the front end and so on. Look at all the components, including how the applications are being provisioned and so on. Of course, depending on the scope, whether you're permitted or not. But as far as your knowledge, just don't think about, okay, I only have to learn about cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, server-side request forgery. Look beyond that. Kubernetes. The other thing is authentication, things like OpenID Connect. In this case, is the OpenID Connect authentication flow in Kubernetes, but whatever the case might be in the environment that you're testing, APIs, webhooks, are they done correctly or not? As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be for tomorrow. I have a section in your lab guide that I walk you through 3 different applications that I had for DEF CON last year, and where one of them you actually take advantage of flaws with automation and APIs, right? But there's several other scenarios that you actually have available in Websploit as well. Now, whenever it comes to actually assess an application, you have to understand how the application works. Remember that I actually went over using the application from the beginning, see the purpose of it, the functions like account provisioning and so on. You gather as much information as you can. You use automated tools, etc. But you have to break the application in manageable chunks. And when I say large applications, pretty much is all applications nowadays are big applications. Even large applications can take hours to scan in an automated way, and that's not a pen test, right? So imagine if I said, do an assessment on Netflix. Netflix, you might think, oh, that's an easy application. It's, people look at movies, they see the what is available, or TV shows, and then you have an account provisioning and things like that. But behind the scenes, it is very it's a whole company basically, right? So if you thought that was that really easy, then why they will have hundreds and hundreds of developers in there? So for you to scale, whenever you're dealing with any type of medium to large applications nowadays, you do have to separate them into a functional breakout. Like first take care of the admin panel probably, or API, and as a matter of fact, in some of it may be that the scope is only to look at the admin section, or how the administrative of the application is, right? and some other one may be just how you're integrating a new application through an API, right? So again, it can be super big. The example of Netflix and Zoom, WebEx, those are huge applications, right? So in many cases, of course, you don't have to take it to that level, but you still have to break it down into functional breakouts, even if you're working as a team, right? And also a lot of time to reset the application and purge backend databases if for some reason something goes wrong and so on. Now, OWASP, of course, is the organization that I always point people to become familiar with because they have so many resources, not only the tools that you're learning today, like the set attack proxy, AMAS, that I reviewed earlier, and so on, but they have, excuse me, cheat sheets. A huge project of them is actually cheat sheets that actually allows you to understand. As a matter of fact, let me click on a few things in here so I can at least have them stage. And the other one is these cheat sheets. There we go. So they have very popular projects. This is the top 10 for web applications, the top 10 risks, right? And this has been in existence for quite some time, even though you see 2017 here. There's been many years, over 15 years that they have actually started that. The last one of the last update was 2021. We expect an update, relatively soon. But as you see, yes, there's a few things that change, but the list itself and the categories, you still have broken access control to be the number one thing, cryptography failures, injection, insecure design, and so on. This is for web applications. They also have one for IoT. They have one for mobile. And guess what? They also have one, if you go to LLM top 10, for LLM applications, right? Where you see things like prompt injection, insecure output handling, data training poisoning, model theft, supply chain vulnerabilities, etc. Right? There's a little bit of overlap on some of them, but specifically, these are guidance and information, excuse me, for LLM-based implementation, so generative AI. Now, if you click on an insecure plugin design, just for example, a plugin that is, of course, in many cases driven by an API, all the security one-on-one flaws that you may actually expect in an API are not new, are going to be pretty much the same in this type of integrations. However, there's a few other things that, again, they are not new, but people are introducing in these things, like accepting all parameters in a single text fields instead of different input parameters, or input validation. That's a big one. A plugin that accepts raw SQL or programming statement, just a SQL injection type of attack, right? As you see a few examples in here. SQL injection is one of them. How to prevent it? Guess what? It's pointing to OWASP. Well, I guess they're OWASP pointing to them, right? But for the application security verification standard, nothing brand new, or how to actually do static application security testing or dynamic and interactive application security testing, things that you will use for web applications, or API keys, OAuth 2.0. Remember that I mentioned, OpenID Connect. Depending on the environment that you're integrating, is not something that is specific to just the model, right? So think about that. Is like a lot of people that are now either truly using AI in production, which are a few, but a lot of people claim that they're actually using AI into production, and they're not, right? They're still experimenting. But guess what? They're actually introducing some very basic security problems that should have never been introduced in even a regular web application. But whenever they're experimenting, they change that into production. And guess what? Now you're exposing a very bad vulnerability that that definitely even for the use of AI, right? Exposing data and so on. So definitely become familiar with these resources. The other thing from OWASP, actually two more things. One is the cheat sheets, right? So if you want to go and deep dive into authorization, and it's not only about authorization problems and vulnerabilities and so on, but recommendations on what should be the mitigation. So if you are going to be an ethical hacker, pen tester, red teaming, blah, 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 you must, it will be your market differentiator, if you will, and if you want to call it that way, but you must put recommendations because it's useless. You can tell me a report that says, I have 100 vulnerabilities, but if you have no recommendations on how to actually, mitigate them, or, in many cases, you may be doing some assessment for non-technical people, then they're going to say, okay, oh, thank you. I mean, but I cannot do anything, right? Well, become familiar with the techniques of mitigations. And one of you was actually asking me about final tips for an exam. I'm not going to mention your IDs or your initials, even though nobody's going to know your name. But one of you is actually preparing for PenTest Plus tomorrow. So first, kudos and good luck. And I gave him a few tips. But one of the things that I completely forgot to actually mention to you was the mitigation. They also include a lot of questions about mitigations of like SQL injection for parameterized queries, right, and so on. And just in this cheat sheet series, I mean, there's a lot of them that they use from it. They've used from here, and there's examples in some of them. Let me see if I can keep this going. Yeah, there we go. Let's go into access control. There's examples of other resources outside, like NIST and other organizations that have provided additional references on how to prevent them and so on. Right? Now, whenever it comes to participating with OWASP, that's another question that I get all the time. Let me actually go to OWASP.org real quick. It's the main page. They have explored the world of cybersecurity, right? And you have here a few. Actually, they changed a little bit of the page this week. Make it a little bit smaller. I think maybe because of that. Nope, it just changed it. They had a picture of like a little gathering of a presenter and then of course an audience in there, and it's because they have chapters all around the world, and they also have events and everything. You can actually see the events schedule here all over the world. But the chapters, these are local chapters that if you don't have one near where you live, you can even create a one, right? But if you look at the geographical locations, it's all over the world: Africa, Asia, Caribbean. If you click on the Caribbean here, if you want to go even to the Caribbean, there you go. It's one of the pictures in there. Tons of gathering and so on. A lot of them actually are scheduled through meetups. A lot of them, they actually have their own website, their own tools, etc. It all depends. At the end of the day, to be honest, it depends on how big the city is, right? How many people actually are attending. Like if you have a city like New York, they do have, a big, like big crowd that go in there. But don't get discouraged if you don't have one, because you can start one. And that's the beauty of the cybersecurity community. They do a lot of virtual events too, and so on, and gathering. And that's the best way, not only to learn, but to build your network and so on. Is learn from each other, contribute. Hopefully you're attending this. In a few weeks, you're participating in scenarios like that, and you're teaching others, right? Even if you find out today, oh, I went to this resource that Omar was actually talking about. Now I became even more familiar with it than Omar. Teach it, share it, put a GitHub repository, put a blog post. That's how we contribute back to the community, and we all need it, because the world of cybersecurity is changing by the second, right? And especially with emerging technologies nowadays. All right, so going back here again, you have the Websploit containers and so on. Within the containers, you have different intentional vulnerable applications. There is yet another OWASP project called WebGoat. And there's another one called JuShop. There's another one called Mutiliday. All those are intentional vulnerable applications. And in the case of WebGoat, the one that you see in front of your screen, it is amazing because it allows you to actually walk through the definitions of vulnerabilities, the examples of the vulnerabilities, and then it gives you exercises that you can complete. And the one that you see in front of you is the SQL injection exercise. And in your lab guide, of course, we go through additional reconnaissance things like Necto and the fuzzers. And I explain what fuzzers are, and there are a couple of tools that you can use for enumeration of a web application. Historically, there was one, or there still is, one called Buster to find directories and files in a website or a web application, right? You can also do things like DNS subdomains like you did before, or even virtual host names on target web servers. But then that was a little bit slower, and again, legacy tool, if I want to pick a word. Then there was another one called GoBuster. Basically, is the same concept of Buster, but they created a tool written in Go, and it's a lot more modern alternative to it, a lot faster, and it's very configurable. And I have an exercise here for you to complete. Again, I'm going to give you some time in the next few minutes to complete a few of those exercises, and I'm going to walk you through a couple of things in here, and then we're gonna find a stopping point. But GoBuster, again, written in Go, you can do directory enumeration. You can even do DNS subdomain enumeration. You can even look for S3 buckets in AWS for enumerating them and seeing if they're actually exposed and exposing some sensitive information. And there's another tool, if I can keep going down below, again, all this is the instructions, but there's another tool called FUF, the Fast Web Fuzzer, that is also written in Go. Again, it's another alternative. It can do subdomain discovery, can do directory discovery, can do file discovery, can be parameter discovery, and so on. So you may ask, so Omar, you tell me all these tools, which ones do you use? Well, it's like whenever you go to, I'm in the US, right? So my example is going to be like Home Depot, Lowe's, and so on. But any type of shopping for home improvement that might be in your area, right? On where you go in it, and you got many different tools. Think about it. These are free. It's not like you have to pay for it. Some of them you do have to pay. But you go to the store and you say, okay, I have a favorite drill in my house, but this one is new. This one has, this new feature. And then you go ahead and buy it, right? But whenever you go home and then you actually are doing a task, it may be that the old, drill that still works, you used it for that task. It was probably more adjacent to you. You're just more familiar with it, and so on. Think about these tools like that, right? Now, there are some that are significantly different, but a lot of these are very, very similar in nature. And give me 1 second here. And basically, they're very similar in nature, and it's in some cases a personal preferences. And give me 1 second here. I was trying to actually get a message in my screen from 124. I may have to refresh, but hopefully you can still see my screen and so on. It's and hopefully change it so you can see at least an example of FOV in the lab guide. It should be in front of your screen. But basically, again, it's a personal preferences depending on the task you're doing, and you have many different tools. In my case, in some cases, I run two tools that are somewhat competitive to each other, like FOV and GoBuster, at the same time to different web applications, and so on. Then, as you see in the screen, a lot of the syntax, and you will learn this as you go through the app guide. A lot of the syntax are very similar, even though they're completely different applications. Like FOV and GoBuster, they have Wordlist, and they have the -w to use the wordlist, or -u for a URL. The main differences is that in FOV, you actually have to put the keyword fuzz wherever you want to actually, look for and enumerate that information, right? So a lot of them are there, right? Now, I do have scenarios in O'Reilly as well, the complete FOV lab in O'Reilly, but tons of additional, excuse me, of additional examples and exercises in here. This one that you see in front of your screen is using FOV in combination with the Burp Suite tool that I mentioned to you earlier. Now, that's what I want to actually take at least a couple of moments in here and explain Burp Suite and all these proxies. A proxy is a tool that, in this context, is a tool that you're using to analyze a web application, and it's intercepting the transactions between your web browser and the web application. It is not the proxies that allows you to go to the internet, in a corporate environment. That's a different type of proxy. But this one is a web proxy that is for the purpose of intercepting, modifying, and learning about a web application, right? Intercepting and modifying the transactions to learn and exploit a web application and find vulnerabilities, right? So there's a big difference in there. Later in the lab guide, and that's where I'm probably gonna stop here today and walk you through tomorrow. Probably we're gonna start with exercise 12, where I start going over some of these vulnerabilities, like authentication and session management vulnerabilities, that then you use proxies, and then I walk you through, like, literally step by step, like you see in the screen. Step 1, click on proxy. Step 2, open the browser, the built-in browser, or if you want to use another browser, how to actually set that up to send traffic to the proxy. And then we use a web application that is vulnerable. Let me go to the screen. Give me 1 second here. And you use a proxy, in this case Burp, to intercept the transactions between your web browser and the web application. So we will definitely deep dive into that a lot more tomorrow. We're gonna start now with the additional reconnaissance for web applications, because I think that's actually a good, I was about to say demarcation point, but a good stopping point. And as you see, I'm scrolling to the right, and the section that I'm asking you to stop is page 41. Actually, take that back. Page 42, right? The answer of everything. So that's exercise 12. So I am going to give you a break right now. The last break of the day is a 15-minute break, even though it's late in the day. Actually, I'm gonna make it 10, just to catch up with some of the exercises that we have in here, like at least somewhat become familiar, and then we do a quick Q&A, and then we adjourn for tomorrow. So let me do a 10-minute timer, and please try to at least review, all the way to exercise 12. And this is only page 42 out of 100 and plus pages, right? So I told you that we're not going to have enough time for all the materials. And again, I just gave you access to 34 other labs in one site for the NetAcad, and then the Web Security Academy from Portswigger. They have dozens of labs in there, so it's a lot of material, a lot of homework that I give you. But I want to actually at least expose you to this, because, again, the better and the more that you practice, the better you will become. Actually, while the timer is going, let me actually address, let's see, a couple of things that I see in the Q&A panel. One of them is, oh yeah, perfect. Actually, this is amazing. It was not even a question, but it was an answer back from the person that is preparing for a certification, and that person mentioned that that there's, he's preparing for some of the lab guides that actually I authored, but also things like U-Certify. U-Certify is basically another platform that, Pearson and O'Reilly are partners with, that you can actually study and do exercises and labs. But the other one is Try Hack Me, and there are many others. There's Hack the Box and so on. That's an amazing reminder. I have links in my GitHub repository about those. And they're very, very popular. They gamified also the experience. They have free tiers, but full disclosure, for a lot of the content in there, especially for the walkthroughs and so on, or new boxes, you do have to pay, right? The other two questions is from PK. So for web app crack, so web application testing, I assume, I suppose that there's best to know which some parts of programming language is correct. Yes. So in some cases, depending on who you ask, if you ask 5 people, you're going to get 10 answers on this topic. But in my recommendation, if you want to really understand and go deep into even web applications that are in some cases abstracted, it is my suggestion that at least you become familiar with a web application, or a programming language that is used for web applications. Like, for example, JavaScript or Python and the underlying libraries or the frameworks. Why? Because in some cases, if people actually are using some techniques or frameworks and so on, maybe either eliminating vulnerabilities or introducing vulnerabilities at the same time, right? The other thing is that if you then want to create your own, small payloads and, callbacks and so on, having that in your tool chest that you can literally just very easily create a script and so on, that goes a long way. Now with ChatGPT and everything else, you can create that in 2 seconds, right? But absolutely, and as a matter of fact, this is not a joke. You can absolutely use a generative AI to actually learn programming and then move faster. And of course, there's a lot of arguments in the industry because the CEO of NVIDIA mentioned that is the end of programming, that you're never going to use it, or you don't need to program anymore. It's going to take a long time. And if we don't have people that truly understand how these things are working and underlying, at the end of the day, AI is software, we'll lose the battle, right? So I think that actually now is a little bit more important that you truly understand the underlying, capabilities. But yes, everything is getting abstracted now. The way that you're going to interact with any computer, it is changing. It is not going to change. It's already changing, right? And then APK says on the lab PDF, there's a command to install lots of Docker containers and utilities. Is there a corresponding command for uninstalling the tools? Yeah, that's like a Websploit. And the reason that I put that in, that I'm suggesting to put in a VM is actually so you can just delete that VM afterwards, right? So let's say you want to have your own VM with Kali, right? And you can literally just clone Kali or Parrot and then run the containers or run the script and then do that. There's no uninstall script itself. I put a lot of things in there. That's a good suggestion. Again, I don't have one, but the easiest way is even to do a snapshot in a VM, then go roll back to that if you don't want to. It's not only about the containers, it's about Docker, it's other repositories that I clone, including my own payloads. I mean, a lot of things that I actually put in Websploit. So it's not just uninstalling applications. So the easiest way is actually to either roll back to a snapshot or to delete the clone, right, of a VM. But really good questions. All right, we have 4 minutes and 15 seconds left. I am going to get some water before I lose my voice, but continue to work in the exercises. And once we come back, we do a quick Q&A. We're going to finish up a little bit earlier today, but we're going to pick up the rest of the material here tomorrow. Plus, you're going to get another lab guide tomorrow. So yes, don't think that this is it. You're gonna get a lot more material tomorrow and a lot of more exercises. So with that, I'll talk to you in 4 minutes. All right, there's just a few seconds left on that timer, and I want to at least open up for any last minute questions. Thank you for those of you that just commented in the Q&A panel or that continue to ask any questions, especially PK. A shout out to you in there for tomorrow. Hopefully you can see the slide in here. We will continue with web applications. As a matter of fact, we just scratching the surface on that section. So we'll definitely spend some time in web applications. We're gonna go very briefly into networking devices. We may actually just concentrate on web applications because pretty much everything nowadays is a web application. But I'm gonna give you a lot of hints on how to create labs and exercises for networking devices and wireless, and that includes Wi-Fi and IoT. And then buffer overflows, social engineering, post-exploitation, things like command and control, exfiltration, previous escalation, and so on. So we will conclude tomorrow with a few references to how to write a pen test report. So a lot of material tomorrow too, but I wanted to at least share that. I do not see any pending questions in the Q&A panel. I do see a couple of things in the group chat that I just saw, but again, this is different than the Q&A panel. It says, "Can you please write? Can you please write?" I'm not sure what that means, but I think that was from earlier. And then, which programming language do you recommend for people to get started? Python. That's my recommendation, right? But for then, depending on the things that you want to do, like for example, if you're gonna go more into like kernel assessments, right? Like go really deep and look for a kernel exploitation of a Linux system or even Windows and so on. Learn about the older implementations because this issue is still there, right? Like memory unsafe languages like C, C++, etc. But also dedicate a lot of time on learning the new ones because it's what we're going to be implementing currently and in the future, which are memory safe languages like Rust and Go and so on, right? So, but for people to just get started, the rule of thumb that most people actually recommend is to start with Python. And that's where you see like the PenTest Plus certification, including Python and PowerShell, and they even have a little bit of JavaScript. The majority of it is actually like Python. All right, so those are the questions that I see. One more. Are there any internship recommendations to get experience? Unfortunately, that depends on where you reside. More than glad to actually follow up afterwards. In many cases, the internships of companies, a lot of people think about this only internships in companies. You may have opportunities to even pro bono, like even for free, if you want to actually explore like a pen test. A lot of people have done that. Very creative ways of doing pro bono. Pro bono means free type of work for non-profit organizations, or if you have like whether it's a church or a community center, or your cousin probably owns a small business and so on. They have a web application. You can say, hey, I can do a web assessment, even though I don't get paid, but I would like to actually go through that, and you give me permissions, and I'll do that. You can even put things like that in your resume, right? So it doesn't have to be. There's non-creative ways to do that, but again, depending on the company and your geographical location, there are many different programs. Cisco has a very extensive. As a matter of fact, we just onboarded about just in an area of Cisco about 150 different interns, like literally this week. But they're gonna start in June, I believe. But yeah, tons of opportunities and so on. So thank you again for your time. I'll talk to you tomorrow. We're gonna pick it up from this exercise 12, if you will, and I'll pass it back to Ellen. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Omar. Thank you to everyone who participated in today's course. This concludes day one of Becoming a Hacker. Just as a reminder, the course was recorded and we'll be sending you an email with a link to the recording. The recording is also available from the course landing page. Thanks again for attending. We hope that you benefited from the course and look forward to your participation in future O'Reilly Live courses. Goodbye, everyone.